February 1974. Los Angeles. Chateau Marmont Hotel, 12:30 a.m. Bob Dylan was sitting alone at the hotel's quiet bar. In front of him, a half-full glass of whiskey. On the table, several pages of handwritten notes. The hum of the city drifted in from outside, but the bar was silent. The bartender was polishing glasses. A couple in the corner was talking quietly. Dylan held his pen, but wasn't writing. He was just thinking. That week, everything was moving fast. After 8 years of silence, he had released Planet Waves with the band and embarked on a major American tour. Tickets had sold out in minutes. Critics were thrilled. Newspapers ran headlines. Dylan is back. But every comeback comes with a price. And no one had fully understood that price yet. Think about this for a moment. In 1974, Bob Dylan wasn't just a musician. He was a symbol recognized around the world. The voice of the 1960s, the singer of the civil rights movement, the conscience of folk music. People looked to him, not just for music, but for something to believe in. And symbols like Bob Dylan cannot make ordinary decisions. The stadium tour decision hit the music world like a bomb. Dylan wasn't playing small venues anymore. Arenas holding thousands, massive productions, light shows, high ticket prices. Some saw this as triumph. Others saw it as betrayal. Neil Young was the most uncompromising, most unyielding voice in music during those years. Born in 1945, Canadian, only 4 years younger than Dylan. But musically, he stood in a completely different place. Young had never chased popularity. Even when Heart of Gold became America's most listened to song in 1972, Young felt uncomfortable. "This is too soft," he said. "This isn't me." And immediately after, he deliberately released a harsh, noisy, difficult album. He surprised his fans, he surprised the critics. He didn't care about any of it. For Young, making music wasn't a commercial product. Music was a confession, a stance made not to earn money, but to share what was on his mind. He had followed Dylan with respect for years, but this decision felt wrong to him, and he had to say so. The door opened. Neil Young walked in, wearing his usual simple shirt and jeans, hair disheveled, a tense expression on his face. He scanned the bar, saw Dylan, walked directly to his table. Dylan looked up, saw Young, said nothing, just watched. Young pulled out a chair, paused for a moment before sitting, as if thinking one last time, then sat down. "We need to talk." Dylan set his pen down on the table. "This tour." Young leaned forward. His voice was low but certain. "What are you doing, Bob?" Dylan didn't answer. He lifted his glass, took a sip, waited. Stadiums, massive productions, light shows, high ticket prices. Young shook his head. "This isn't you. You started doing this to play in small Greenwich Village venues. You touched people. You became a real artist." No one in the bar was talking. The bartender had gone still. The couple in the corner had stopped too. "You sold yourself for all of this, Bob." 7 full seconds of silence filled the room. According to music historians of that era, these kinds of tensions were very common in music circles. Artists coming from the folk tradition constantly lived with the conflict between commercial success and artistic integrity, and Dylan found himself right in the middle of that conflict. But that night, Dylan's response wasn't what anyone expected. Dylan quietly set his glass down on the table. He looked at Young for a long moment. "Dear, I have a question for you. Do you know how many people listened to your last album?" Young answered with irritation. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It has everything to do with it." Dylan leaned forward. "Why do we make music? So people can hear our songs. The more people who hear them, the better. If stadiums are full of listeners, why is that a bad thing? But the prices, I don't set the ticket prices." But it's done under your name, with your approval. Dylan paused for a moment. He looked at the notes on the table, then turned back to Jan. Do you remember what happened in 1965? Jan stayed silent. Newport Folk Festival. I brought an electric guitar on stage. What happens? They booed. They booed. Yes, they booed. Dylan lowered his head. Pete Seeger wanted to cut the power cables. John Baez stopped talking to me. The press wrote, Dylan is dead. He paused. Back then they said the same things. You sold out. You betrayed us. This can't be you. Young looked away for a moment. What did I do back then? Young didn't answer, but he knew the answer. I kept doing what I knew, because I make music for myself, not to get anyone else's approval. I don't need yours, or the critics either. If you find stories like this valuable, don't forget to like and subscribe. I play stadiums because there are millions of people out there listening, and every one of those people feels something. Every one of them takes something home. How is that selling out? Young wanted to say something, but he couldn't say anything, because what Dylan said makes sense, and accepting that was hard for him. The disagreement between these two actually reflected one of the biggest questions in music history. What should an artist's true purpose be? To stay pure? To play in small venues for smaller crowds, but be completely themselves? Or to reach bigger audiences, to share their songs with more people? This question didn't just haunt Dylan and Jan, it was the question in the mind of every great artist who came after them. Music historian Graham Marcus, writing about that period, said Dylan didn't make a choice in 1974. He did what he always did. He followed his own instinct. How others interpreted that voice never stopped him. Kurt Cobain, in a 1993 interview, assessed Dylan's period this way. Getting on big stages requires a kind of permission. In our generation, Dylan showed us the way, and Bono said in 2005, without the 1974 tour, U2 would be in a different place today. Dylan showed us something was possible. Jan looked at Dylan for a long time. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket without saying a word, walked toward the door, stopped at the threshold, didn't turn around, but spoke. Maybe you're right. And he left. And he left. Dylan turned back to his notes, picked up his pen, and kept writing. What Dylan wrote in his notes that night was never known to anyone. But in the memories and accounts of musicians from that era, recording studio engineers are said to have recalled, the next morning, Dylan was different, more motivated, more determined, as if he had something to prove. By the end of the 1974 tour, 651,000 tickets had been sold. It became the most talked about rock tour of that era. Dylan hadn't just come back, he had come back more powerfully than ever. Neil Young, years later in a documentary, is said to have recalled that night with these words, Dylan was actually right, but accepting that in that moment was hard for me. Both were legends, but they looked at the same truth through different eyes. And that 7-second silence between them. Sometimes the things that change history aren't the words that are spoken. They are the words that wanted to be said but never were. What do you think about this story? We're waiting for your comments.